tiger on the prowl. I'ma make it go wild. I'm original, and I told you so. I'm a kid in the candy store with the leather on the denim. I ain't the cure, I'm the venom. If you wanna find me, find the taillight. Something's coming in, you're gonna wanna take a red eye. It's time to go. It's time to go. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready.
Good afternoon to all of you. Good evening and good morning, depending on which part of the planet you're in. It's Saturday here in the Philippines. And again, we have ang Maestro. Yes. And for our episode today, we have entitled it Robin Wins Debate over Amboys, Deception, and Lies. There you go. Ano ho ba ang debateng ito at paano ito nangyari? No? It's actually more than that. But before anything else, let me remind you that I have 3 books. I published 3 books. A Problem for Every Solution, a Vaccine for a Virus Called Racism, and The Poverty of Power. And if you are interested, I can have a bundle for you for 3 or individually. Just text Maestro at 0917 336 4366. Okay, back to the debate. What was it all about? And there, Senator Robin Padilla stood firm, even as many wannabes, including fellow senators, debated him at a budget hearing last September 12 in the Senate Committee on National Defense. What? Robin Padilla in a debate and winning it? My goodness. What were the issues? 2 main issues. First is the Chinese Coast Guard civilian or military. That it is military, you had Senator Risa Hontiveros, Defense Undersecretary Ignacio Matriaga, and self-proclaimed expert J. Batombacal. And as civilian, you have Senator Padilla, and also joined by Senator De La Rosa eventually. What was it all about? Well, under the definition of the PLA Navy, according to Yusek Madriaga, the Coast Guard is under the People's Liberation Army, including the Chinese militia vessels. So the Undersecretary concluded that technically speaking, alam niyo yung mga technically speaking na yan, ha? The nature of their Coast Guard is not civilian. Of course, Senator Padilla said, let's not change international law. The Coast Guard is civilian in nature. They are policemen. They police the seas. Ayan po mga kabansa. So, how did it all end up? Well, Article 2 of the Coast Guard Law of the People's Republic of China says the Coast Guard's units of the People's Armed Police Force, to wit, Coast Guard agencies, shall uniformly perform the duties of maritime rights protection and law enforcement. This was pointed out by Dr. Massimo Lando of the City University of Hong Kong. All right, but I researched the matter and I was led to this chart table of organization. And the hair split was easily resolved in this Right. So let's look at the chart here. The TO. You have the State Council and other units related to public security and infrastructure. All right. And on the right, there is the Central Military Commission with two agencies, the People's Armed Police Force and the People's Liberation Army. Now, what does Madriaga, why did Madriaga say technically speaking? Huh? I don't know if he was aware of the distinction, but during wartime, expressed by that red line over there, all right, the functions of the Coast Guard is coordinated through a theater command, all right, with the People's Liberation Army on top of it. Okay? And they are the ones that coordinate the activities of the Coast Guard, the internal guard units, and the mobile units. But that is on red. And here's the distinction, Article 10 of the People's Armed Police Law. Wartime missions of the People's Armed Police Force. It's not only, no? It's not only the Coast Guard, but even the People's Armed Police Force are to be commanded during wartime by the Central Military Committee or Theater Command authorized by it. Non-combat military operations in which the People's Armed Police Force and the PLA jointly participate are to be commanded by field commands authorized by the Central Military Commission. Well, obviously, they are to be coordinated differently during wartime. Alam nga naman, pakalat-kalat sila mga kababansa sa karagatan na hindi coordinated by the one that is controlling the war theater. Yan, yung theater command na sinasabi dyan. No? But, tayo ba ngayon ay nasa state ng wartime? Ayan, yan ang problema. No? And I will survey that later. Yung blue is during peacetime, in which the Coast Guard is under the People's Armed Police Force. All right? Tama si Robin Padilla, because we are in a period of peace. But people also would like to stretch it further, like Risa Hontiveros saying that nevertheless, they are under the Central Military Commission, so they are, in that case, military. Alam niyo, nagtataka ako dito sa extraordinary preponderance of this appetite of martial consciousness. I would just call it that way. No? Masyadong praning. Paano na ba ito? Okay. Ayaw. Alright. Ito ang aking survey, mga kabansa. Ito ang aking survey. The problem with us Pinoys is that we are too legalistic and judgmental. What really is important, in discussing these things is not to be too praning or too technical. Why? What really is important are the functions being performed on the ground. The Chinese Coast Guard exercises maritime rights protection and law enforcement in the seas. Mga kabansa, the Chinese Coast Guard is not under the PLA. That's a very clear distinction. And if we follow the hair split, even the People's Armed Police Force would not qualify to be a civilian force because it reports to the Central Military Commission, which is on top of both the police and the army? Para bang may insinuation kayo that even in peacetime, the entire Chinese nation is under martial law? Ano ba yan? Ha? Masyado naman yan. If we overread ourselves, then the AFP, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, is a civilian body because it reports to the Civilian Department of National Defense. Contrarily, Madriaga himself would not qualify as a civilian, serving in the National Defense Department as Undersecretary, because he should be instead called Brigadier General Madriaga in the Philippines, because he has served in the Philippine Army since graduating from the Philippine Military Academy in 1991. More so, the Philippine Coast Guard will have nothing to do but man ports and process passengers on sea travel because they are under our Department of Transportation. Ha? Ito ba ang dahilan? Ha? Ito ba ang dahilan kung bakit si Admiral Artemio Abo ay nag-order para sa kanyang sariling gamit ay 4 million peso Land Cruiser? Ha? A 4 million peso Land Cruiser? And had it bulletproof for another 4 million, and bought his staff 36 Isuzu MUX sports utility vehicles? Dahil sila ay nasa Department of Transportation? What am I doing here? I'm just trying to stretch it and reduce it to absurdity. Too much hair split over nothing. This is also why I cannot blame former National Security Advisor Ronald Llamas for coming to the rescue of Risa Hontiveros, attacking Padilla left and right, especially in an interview with Richard Haydarian on social media. Even if she has long denied that they are a couple, how much stretch do you want? I can stretch this. This is also why I cannot fault Senate President Mig Zubiri for meeting in Washington, D.C., the butcher of Ukraine, si Victoria Nuland, and believing her carrot of building an arms industry in the Philippines. Mga kabansa, masyado na natin overstretch ito. So, yun mga kabansa. No? Well, anyway, what was the second issue? The second is the presence of the U.S. Navy Poseidon over the immediate vicinity of the resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal an escalation of the conflict. At alam nyo ba ang sabi ni Senator Francis Tolentino at Batong Bakal? Aba, ay ang Poseidon daw ay hindi war plane. Okay, let's play the video cut.
Padilla fears U.S. presence would spark tension, saying an American military aircraft was deployed against a Chinese Coast Guard vessel, which he believed was civilian. But China actually placed its Coast Guard under its military. Panel Vice Chair Francis Tolentino also clarified that P-8 Poseidon is not a warplane.
Okay. Paano naman? Okay. Dito, si Jay Batong Bakal, self-proclaimed expert daw. Alam niyo naging famous ito nung buhay pa si Secretary Albert de Rosario kasi laging ginagamit ito. At yung kanyang institute sa UP Law Center, yung Institute for Maritime and Laws of the Seas, etc., ay naging adjunct ng Albert de Rosario Institute. And Albert de Rosario Institute was an adjunct of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Aha, halaka. Ano ang sabi niya? Poseidon is not a combatant aircraft, therefore not a war equipment. Number 2, he agrees in U.S. intervention in our resupply mission. In other words, he does not consider it an escalation. Meron ng presensya, hindi lang ng ating military, meron pang umaali-aligid sa itaas. Na U.S. warplane, at sinasabi niya, this is justified because the U.S. is a treaty ally. Let us hear Jay Batumbakal say it himself. Here is the video cut.
Ibig niyo pong sabihin, Professor, pumapayag kayo na may Amerikano dyan.
Pumapayag po ako dahil sila po ay ating treaty ally.
Treaty ally
Sa
in
totoo lang
defense.
po, ang China
In
po, hindi po
defense.
nagre-responde kung hindi po sila, kung sa tingin lang,
Treaty
mali
ally
yung
po nila,
harap nilang
natin
bansa.
sila in defense. Hindi ba po? Yun po ang
Ah,
treaty natin. Depensa.
Depends nga po.
Depensa. Oh,
Kaya nga
hindi,
po, tinatawagan sila para pag may operation tayo na kung nangyayari, meron din tayong defense.
opo, malinaw po yun, di ba? Yung ating Mutual Defense Treaty.
Opo. Opo.
Opo, hindi dapat tayo nagpo-provoke.
Opo. At so
Opo.
far naman po, wala tayong ginagawa na provocative. Nire-resupply natin
Kinaya
yung
nga
ating
po
sariling
natin
barko.
ng 6 na taon na walang kano eh. 6 years, walang kano. Kaya natin. Bakit tayo may kano ngayon?
Okay. I-edit na lang ho namin yon sa final version. But for now, ano talaga itong Poseidon? And let us show this slide. At magugulat kayo. Ito pong spy plane na ito, sa bandang kaliwa, mga kabansa. Sa bandang kaliwa. Dito, gamitin natin yung pink. Ito, bandang kaliwa. Ano ang dala nito? What is it capable of bringing with it? Mark 54 torpedoes, naval mines, harpoon anti-ship missiles, SLAMERs, radar-guided air-launched missiles, and depth charges. Hindi warplane. Bakit? Even the intelligence being gathered by this Poseidon is a war activity. It's giving real-time intelligence input to combatant aircrafts and coordinating them. But more than that, eto, hindi na siya pag may nakita siyang surface ship, pag meron siyang nakitang submarine, meron na siyang torpedoes, pwede na siya mag-plant ng naval mines, pwede siyang mag-launch ng harpoon anti-ship missiles, and for its defense, air-to-air, air-launched missiles, and down below, it can plant depth charges. Ano ba bang not a warplane that you are talking about? Sobra naman yan. Oversimplification naman kayo. Huwag naman ganyan. Ha? Huwag naman ganyan. Alright? So, sino ang nanalo sa debate, mga kabansa? Decision defining foreign policy. Ha? At dito, nilagay ko itong cartoon, what would Daddy do? Because later on, we will connect back to this because President Marcos Sr. is part of our program this afternoon, this evening. Ano ang policy declaration? That the Philippines will push for non-military solutions to de-escalate the tension surrounding the Ayungin resupply mission as ordered by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Effectively, therefore, the President civilianized approaches in the South China Seas. Panalo! Sinustain ng Presidente ang Robin Padilla. In other words, the President recognized the civilian nature of the Coast Guard and the military nature of the Poseidon. Simple. No? Pero don't rejoice kaagad. Dahil alam niyo na itong administrasyon, no? Itong administrasyong Marcos ay napaka complicated. Ganun na lang sasabihin ko. Kasi one day after Marcos civilized our Ayungins, he is second-guessed right away by his Undersecretary for National Security, Jonathan Malaya. And I noticed that this wannabe has a tendency of always reading to the point of misreading the president. Ano sabi niya? Iba raw ang sistema ng China. They have a different political system. Technically, they're authoritarian. State run by a ruling communist, nag-red tagging pa, Communist Party of China, and they have placed their Coast Guard and CMM under the Chinese Military Commission. May mga militia. So they are technically part of the military infrastructure. This is the same American playbook that Yusek Madriaga of the National Defense was using. In other words, there is a collusion in the security community of under Marcos to lead him on. And this has infected the Coast Guard. Wala ito sa script ko ngayon. Pero of late, anong ginawa nila? Nangoriente sila at pumutol ng a portion of a barrier that was imposed by the Chinese Coast Guard diyan sa entrance sa lagoon sa Scarborough Shoal. So, assumably, anong ginawa ni Tariela? Pumutol daw siya ng kapiraso. Pero wala naman siyang pinapakita. At ang explanation ng Chinese Foreign Ministry was that there were two ships that laid a barrier in between them. There were two ships, and in between them there was a barrier na may mga floater sa taas. And under the floater may net. No? Alright? Bakit? Kasi may nahuling Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources na pumasok dun sa lagoon. No? Sa Scarborough Shoal. Alam niyo po mga kabansa, Alam niyo po mga kabansa, meron pong lagoon dyan sa Scarborough Shoal. Let me just ad-lib and describe it to you. Meron pong lagoon dyan. No? Alright? Kumbaga, ito yung shoal. Alright? Meron pong lagoon dun sa loob. No? Ito po yung lagoon. Ito yung buong shoal. Ano nangyayari dyan sa loob ng lagoon na yan? And of course, surrounding is the open sea. Oh. Yan po, ginagawa dyan ng China dahil yan po ang itlugan. No? It's the nestling ground for fish. The fish go in there, lay their eggs, and then the small fishes grow, and when they're of certain size, they find their way out of the lagoon, all right, and into the open sea. Nandun sa open sea, around the shoal, hindi naman pinagbabawal ang manghuli. In fact, ang sinabi rito ng Arbitral Tribunal is that the Scarborough Shoal is entire and its environs has been the traditional fishing grounds of many nations, China, Vietnam, the Philippines, etc. And therefore, hindi naman ito sinauli sa atin, even by ang kanilang arbitral tribunal. At hindi rin yan binigay sa China. No? So, yan mga kabansa. So, hindi ito parte. Hindi ito parte ng ating teritoryo. Why? Kasi yung ito po ang teritoryo natin according to the Treaty of Paris of 1898. No? Yung pong Scarborough Shoal nandyan sa labas. Alright? So, sa pronouncement kaninang umaga ni President Marcos, President Marcos, i-verify mo naman kung ano sasabihin mo. Sasabihin mo na we will enforce the protection of our borders. Ano bang mini-mention mong borders? Ito bang border na treaty limit natin? Kasi ito ho ating territorial sea, papasok ng ating territorial land. Pero ito, Scarborough Shoal, nandyan yan sa kiniklaim ng China. Palitan ko nga ito. Right? Nandyan yan sa kiniklaim ng China. Kaya nga meron, ito yung teritoryo ng Pilipinas, ito yung claim ng China, teritoryo nila. Alright? Nakaka-confuse yung claim ninyo ng 200 nautical miles dito. Alright? Palabas pa. Pero yung Scarborough Shoal, di mo masasabing teritoryo natin yan. The best that we can get here is that it is, according to our claim, part of our 200 nautical miles economic zone. Pero it will overlap with the claim of China. Alright? So ano ang sinabi ni Malaya? Balik tayo kay Malaya. When asked if the Philippines should respond not just with the Philippine Coast Guard but with the Philippine Navy to counter the Chinese militia vessels, Malaya ridiculously added a military slant. Alam mo sabi niya? In all these resupply missions, there are always 2 Navy ships 20 to 30 nautical miles away coming with the Philippine supply vessels just in case something happens. Classic double speak. Kung yan ay kung yan ay civilian resupply mission, then it should be civilian all the way. Wala yung mga sneaky, ha? Na nakapalibot dyan sa palipaligid, no? Ha? Pero binanggit, iba tong bakal. Diyos mio, bato na bakal pa. Ang Mutual Defense Treaty, he is invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty in a mere resupply mission, in a mere civilian, in a mere humanitarian delivery. Okay, Mutual Defense Treaty. Balikan natin. The 87 Constitution prohibits foreign military bases in the Philippines. This is an explicit provision or malum prohibitum. In Article 18, Section 25, it is stated, foreign military bases, troops shall not be allowed in the Philippines, except, ayan, in other words, it's prohibited except in the following ground. Under a treaty duly concurred by the Senate, and when the Congress so requires, ratified by a majority of the votes cast by the people in a national referendum held for that purpose. And thirdly, recognized as a treaty by the other contracting state. Mga kabansa. Yan yung tatlong requirements. Ang tanong, does the Mutual Defense Treaty comply with all these constitutional requirements? The answer is no. But let's not go into that because our argument is flowing. Nanganak pa nga ng dalawa, nagkaroon pa ng Visiting Forces Agreement and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. But why do they still exist when none of these three complies with the requirements of the Constitution, the basic law of the land? Because we have been sitting on abrogating them. Nobody's initiating. Obviously, may nakikinabang sa ruling class. For the meantime, pseudo experts like Batumbakal uses them. This basis. Just as he used it against Robin Padilla, against defense now, invoking defense in a civilian mission. For their clients' vested, maybe even dangerous purposes. So let's test the Mutual Defense Treaty with the South China Sea conflict. Article 1 of the treaty. Sinimulan mo na Batumbakal, tapusin na natin ang usapan. Each party is to settle international disputes in a peaceful manner so that the international peace is not threatened, and to refrain from the threat of the use of force in any manner that is inconsistent with the purpose of the United Nations. I make no bones about it. The insertion of our armed forces on a foreign warplane in our present South China Sea disputes is an act of war that we provoke. You know, you are playing with dangerous games here, Mr. Batumbakal. Article 2 states that each party, either separately or jointly, through mutual aid, may acquire, develop, and maintain their capacity to resist armed attack. Fine. But we are not under explicit or implicit threat of any attack by any foreign country. Let's stretch it further. All right. Gusto niyo ito eh. You're invoking defense in a resupply mission. Article 4 states that an attack on either party will be acted upon in accordance with constitutional processes, and that any armed attack on either party will be brought to the attention of the United Nations for immediate action. Alam nyo, meron akong napakagandang video cut dito. But first, let me say that the Mutual Defense Treaty does not have a provision on automaticity. And this was even pointed out to me by Sas Rogando Sasso. The participation of the United States will have to be determined by a declaration of war by its Congress, by the U.S. Congress. Let us play the video card.
The United States is not necessarily bound to immediately react because the provision of the Mutual Defense Pact is that you will immediately take steps as is necessary to meet the contingency in accordance with your constitutional processes. What does that mean? That means that you go to the Senate and the House of Representatives. What does that mean? That means delay while we are dying there.
Pinalakpakan ang gusto ng mga Amerikano. Pinalakpakan ang gusto. Si Pangulong Marcos Sr. Kayang-kaya niya ang mga issues na ito. No? Walang automaticity. No? Pangalawa, there is no common definition of terms. At palagay ko, sinasadya ito ng mga military, ng mga hawks, ng mga utak pulbura sa ating lipunan. That's why halos lahat na nangyayari ngayon has something to do with war games, gera-gera, propaganda against China. And then yung mga ibang issues, nakalimutan na yung mas importante pa, as if national security was all there is to it. And I would like to mention that after meeting with Xi Jinping early this year, and being promised 23 billion in a package of assistance, grants, projects, infrastructure, and whatever by China. Ipinagpalit po ito ni Presidente Marcos, yung $23 billion to only $82 million para may kapalit pa para sa 3 additional EDCA sites. May kapalit pa. Mga kabansa. Bakit ba biglang-biglang nagkaroon ng sigla ang Amerika? Mga kabansa. Bakit? Bakit biglang nagkaroon ng sigla ang Amerika? Ano ang ginagamit niyang propaganda? Itong sovereign rights for use of underwater resources within 200 nautical miles dyan sa tinaguriang exclusive. Alam niyo, nakakalito yung word na exclusive. Kasi in a case of overlap, hindi naman nag-exclusive yan. Kung itong coastal state na ito at saka itong coastal state na ito, nagkaroon ng overlap, hindi na exclusive yan. Shared economic zone na yan. No? And on the basis of only one treaty, the UNCLOS, that was only adopted in 1982, paulit-ulit ko sinasite yan dito para pumasok sa kukutin nyo. And an impaired arbitral ruling in 2016. Impaired pa. No? Na kayo mismo, ayaw nyong gamitin lahat ng provision ng arbitral ruling na yan. Ang kinukurot nyo lang sa loob niyan at ginagasgas nyo ng gusto ay yung according to UNCLOS, ay walang legal basis according to UNCLOS, yung 9-dash line ng China. Wala na kayong ibang provision na sinasabi sa taong bayan. Napakaraming provision dyan sa arbitral ruling na yan that is against the Philippines. So pagka yung provisiones na isang treaty na yan ginamit nyo against China, mas marami pang nakaturo sa atin. Pag tinuro nyo yung China, mas maraming impairment na applicable sa atin. Sinabi ko na yung isa kanina, hindi sinuli sa atin ang Scarborough Shoal. Pangalawa, yung ayungin. Hindi pwede maging subject of territory dahil low tide elevation now. And then yung rest na mention ko na in my previous programs. On the other hand, China's claim is for sovereignty, pag-aari. On the basis of historical rights. Na hindi ko na tsatsaniin dito sa episode ngayon dahil na-take up ko na rin ito. Na-take up ko na rin ito in previous programs. A statutory construction of history from the first Sino-Japanese War up to the UN Resolution 5728. In this respect, the Philippine sovereign rights cannot protrude China's sovereign territorial sea. Hindi po nagkakasundo. Pero kung gamitin nyo yung sovereign rights, parang ang ini-imply na ninyo ay pag-aari na natin yung apektadong territory. In this case, kung sovereignty ho ang binabangga, iba yung sovereignty rights at saka sovereignty rights. Pwede mag-overlap, mag-uusap. Dito ho, mas grabe pa eh. Ang binabangga nyo, sovereign territory. Ownership. Pwede ba kayong lumusot, mga kabansa, nang walang permission ng may-ari? Kaya ako nagtataka dito sa mga amuyong ng mga war freaks. Dahil ang China, pumapayag ng pag-usapan to. Pumayag for 24 years sa resupply mission sa Sierra Madre sa Ayungin, sa Parola, nalabas na sa exclusive economic zone natin, sa Pag-asa Island, nalabas na. Dahil, ang importante lang magbigay ng abiso and mag-coordinate, hindi ho Dahil pinangangalandakan na atin ito. What is ours is ours. But in reality, hindi nyo naman ma-enforce. Because in customary international law, what is important is effective control. If you cannot enforce your sovereignty, there is no such thing. And when China enforces it, tinatawag nyo aggressive action? Wow! Anyway, back to MDT. Nandito tayo. Article 5 defines the meaning of attack and purpose, which includes all attacks by hostile power will be held on a metropolitan area by both parties on island territories under its jurisdiction in the Pacific or on its armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the Pacific. We have a problem here because our metropolitan area and island territories are those within the limits stipulated by the Treaty of Paris. Itong simple definition ito. We are even in denial. Even Scarborough Shoal, sabi ko nga kanina, is outside those limits. Even the Kalayaan Island Group was not accepted by your arbitral tribunal. According to UNCLOS, and according to your arbitral tribunal, it cannot be classified as a regime of islands by the arbitral award that you tout the world was a victory. Our claim, remember, is on the basis of sovereign rights, not sovereignty. Lahat lamang ng paggamit ng lahat ng nasa ilalim ng tubig ang allowed dyan. The surface of the water remains international and so with the aerospace. Hindi yung pag-aari yan. So, hindi teritoryo yan. Hindi yung teritoryo. On June 23, when a correspondent from ABS-CBN asked this question to Hillary Clinton, what will America do if China attacks Filipino forces on the Spratly Islands? Alam niyo, sinabi ni Clinton, I'm not going to discuss hypothetical events. Well, that commitment was tested in a non-hypothetical event. which was when we had a standoff at the Scarborough Shoal. Hindi na po hypothetical yun. Tinulungan ba tayo ng Amerika? Hindi. When the Chinese also reclaim artificial islands and build fortification, 5 to 8 islands, tinulungan ba tayo ng Amerikano? Hindi rin po. The Americans just stood by and watched. Hindi na hypothetical yan. Bakit? Precisely because we go back to the top dito. Ha? Hindi kasi metropolitan area yan. At hindi na yan island territory. Mini-mix up nyo po yung inyong exclusive economic zone. Sabi nga ni Bongbong Marcos mismo sa Ayungin Zone, that is a gray area. That is a gray area. So yan po mga kabansa, pinagmamalaki ninyong ironclad commitment. Ha? Bakit biglang naging ironclad ngayon? Bakit biglang nagbibigay ng 82 million ngayon? Ha? Dahil subject to expiry na po ang EDCA by April 28 next year. And the US is building a case for renewal. Oh. So kayong mga anti-war, tutulan nyo na ito. Diyan lang ho dinadala ng DND. Diyan lang ho dinadala ng US State Department at the Pentagon ng Amerika ang usapan. No? Pero once they get that, bagsak na naman tayo sa ilalim na wala na naman tayo sa kanilang radar. Bagsak na naman tayo sa prioridad ng mga kano. And later on, you will hear Robin Padilla say something about it. Pero hindi ko pangungunahan. Ano itong bomba? Bomba! EDCA, bomba! Ayan, mga kabansa. Sulong! Ha? The Americans are really our allies. They're willing to die up to the last Filipino. Sulong, mga kabansa. Okay? But, actually, an armed attack is not even necessary. Ito ang problema. The Philippines, more specifically the EDCA bases, would become prime targets for retaliation or attacks because of U.S. military assets and the presence of foreign troops. Melissa Loha, isang Pilipino po ito, senior research fellow at the Integrated Development Studies Institute and an expert on international law. Ha? Hindi katulad niyang si Bato at si Bakal. Said that EDCA has created a security dilemma for the Philippines. Under the agreement, the Philippines has no right to inspect. Wala tayong karapatang mag-inspeksyon, much less demand permission for the positioning of weapons. Quote, the same threat to our country would still exist because the U.S. can preposition weapons in any location and magnet a counter-strike or instigate preemptive strike. Tandaan po ninyo yung word na yon, preemptive strike from any elements of the United States in our territory. Under this scenario, Loha said, the presence of U.S. military weapons means the Philippines can no longer be considered a neutral state and will become a legitimate target in an international conflict. Pwede ba ito? Nangyayari ba ito sa mundo? Ha? Tingnan natin. According to Professor of Government and Foreign Service at Georgetown University, kano naman ito? In his paper, International Law and Preemptive Use of Military Force, published sa Washington Quarterly, preemptive strike is the use of military force in advance of a first use of force by the enemy. It is a first strike in anticipation of receiving an attack from an opponent in the near future. Pwede po ito. The United States has been notorious for this. For attacking many countries around the globe. Suspetsa pa lang. Nambobomba na sila. Foremost of which is the attack on Iraq for the fictitious weapons of mass destruction. While the United Nations Charter explicitly provides the use of military force in international relations with aggressive war, declared illegal following the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal, the exception in principle is in cases of self-defense. A state is not obliged to suffer the first blow of an attack before it may be permitted to respond. What does this mean? A state, in our case, China, may launch an attack preemptively against another state, the Philippines, if it perceives that there is imminent threat, and this threat could be coming from the American EDCA bases. Basahin po natin muna ang mga comments ng ating readers before we proceed forward. Alright. Yo, malabag. PH. Tapos meron siyang ganun. Prayers. Alfredo Redina, as usual, present. Enrico Abihar, ayaw lang talagang paunlarin ang bansa, kaya sunod-sunod ang dikta ng mga oligarchs. Ayan, mga bansa. No? Ang mga komenta. Pero ang closing remarks po natin ngayon ay mismo manggagaling sa nanalo sa debate, mga kabansa. O ito, habol pa natin ang kay Wilson Chu. Marami pa po kasi pero wala nang oras. They're simply the troublemakers in the world. No? And if you want to read more about that, tandaan po ninyo, 3 ang aking libro, and you can organize maybe a bundle for yourself by dialing 0917-336-4366. Oh, may pahabol pa si Fred Oridina. Balikan natin sumaglit. Ayan, ano sabi? Ukrainizing the Philippines and Taiwan. Ukrainizing the Philippines and Taiwan. Alright, wala na po tayo maraming oras. Nandito po ang ating closing remarks. Magmumula mismo sa kagalang-galang Senador Robin Padilla. Tandaan po ninyo ang kanya sasabihin, babalikan ko kayo.
Punto natin. At alam ko naman po nagkakasundo tayo sa isang punto. Ayaw po natin ito mag-escalate. Kasi mga mahal kong kababayan, matuto din po tayo sa mga nangyari nung mga nakaraan na tayo ay nagtiwala dito sa mga Amerikano nung World War II. Pero ano nangyari? Noong nagkagipitan na, umisplit na si MacArthur, naiwan tayo. I shall return na lang. Nagibagi ba tayo ng 3 taon? Hindi naman natin gera talaga hindi naman natin kalaban yung Hapon eh. Nasabit lang tayo doon.
At least dito, Robin,
Opo.
nag-return talaga.
Nag-return.
At least nag-return, no?
Nag-return po si MacArthur nung panalo na tayo. Inagaw na naman ng mga Amerikano yung glory na sinasabi nila sila tumalo sa Hapon. Pero ang katotohanan, historically, at yan po ay patutunayan ng mga historian, nagtatago na ang mga Hapon nun. Nananalo na ang mga gerilya nung dumating sila MacArthur. Kaya ang gusto ko lamang pong idiin, okay, kaibigan natin ng nandyan sila, maraming salamat, pero wag naman po tayo ibala. Baka tayo ibala lang ng mga yan eh. Wala naman problema sa akin tanda ko na rin naman, masarap din maging bayani, di ba sir? Pero wag naman yung magpapakabayani tayo. para sa glory ng iba. Kung magpapakabayani tayo dahil sa Pilipinas, gulo natin. Tayo. Hindi dahil ibinala lang ako, ibinala lang tayo ng ibang nasyon. Kasi po malalim masyado itong nangyayaring ito. Bakit hindi dapat tayo maging, kumbaga sa chess, pawn? Huwag naman tayo maging pawn. Sana man lang bishop tayo. Di ba? Hindi dapat tayo yung pawn dito. Napakahalaga po na ihanda din natin yung ating mga kababayan. Kasi sa ngayon, sir, siguro naman walang kukontra sa akin dito. Ni ROTC, wala tayo. Siguro naman, sa usapin na yon nagkakasundo tayong lahat. Paano nating sasabihin na handa tayo, yung mga kabataan natin, busy sa TikTok. Kaya sana, magkasundo ka. Kung talagang tayo'y palaban lahat, tutuhanin natin. Yun lamang po, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Robin.
Congratulations, Senator Padilla. Huh? The President heard your wisdom and sustained your position in a foreign policy. You are genuinely patriotic in keeping your country out of harm's way, out of a clear and present danger. Sana pakinggan nila kayo. Huh? But before that, you are a man deeply committed to truth and to peace. And to you, Robin, I say, Assalamu alaikum. Maraming salamat po mga kabansaw. Magkita-kita ulit tayo sa Sabado sa isa na namang episode ng Ang Maestro.
Red eye. It's time to go. It's time to go.